Welcome back to Beholders No One, a D&D podcast. Today I'm here with my friend Dan. Yellow.
Hello.
Dan is from The Last Tapestry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh boy, just right in the hot seat.
Right in the hot seat.
The Last Tapestry is a 5e all LGBT podcast with the 1920s aesthetic, and yeah, we mostly focus on character and narrative, but I've been told we're funny, so I'm gonna believe it. I think
10 agree.
Okay.
I've listened to a couple of episodes. It is next on my list after I finish binging Ellen's Birdhouse Mysteries. I'm almost caught up on that.
Yeah, it's my next one for sure too.
I've listened to the first episode and I enjoyed that. And all of the snippets on Twitter, I'm just like, that's hilarious. I want to listen to this again.
For Birdhouse Mysteries?
For your show.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I transitioned really awkwardly into that. That's normal. That's really exciting because the 1920s theme is not something you necessarily see all the time at all.
Yeah, it's admittedly something I've been, I guess, obsessed with for, oh God, I don't even know how long. I'm just always like, oh, you don't have a lot of 1920s fantasy. And these days you do have more of it, which is really nice because that's totally my jam. But yeah, I remember whenever I first started, when I was like a teenager, I was like, I don't know how to do this, but I definitely want like fantasy and I also want like cars and stuff. So I'm just going to go for it.
Why not both?
Yeah, for sure.
Why do I have to have a chariot? I want a car. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, not to say there wasn't modern fantasy. I definitely don't want to go on the record as saying there was no modern fantasy, but I didn't have a lot of specifically like 1920s troubling. It's fantasy 1920s. I always try to make that very clear just because, normal 1920s is just kind of narrow,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not exactly relevant politically. And that's another thing. I don't think you've gotten very far, right? You said only 4 episodes?
A couple. I don't remember exact numbers, but not that very far.
Yeah. It's something we wanted to do with The Last Tapestry is very similar to Dimension 20, where people talk to Brennan a lot. How much have you listened to Dimension 20? Have you listened to any?
I have watched a couple of their shows, yeah.
Yeah, I know in Fantasy High, at least, one of my favorite scenes is definitely the one with the halfling family, where they're like, they pick up the main party and they start talking like anti-police messages and things like that. And it's just, you don't really see politics entering much into, I guess, TTRPG podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's because you have to be careful about it. When you do talk about it, you have to be, very cognizant of the way that it's coming off. You have to be very cognizant that you're not isolating anyone. Unless, of course, what you're saying is, something that is, I guess, anti-racist, anti-fascist, those kind of things. Like I guess we're radically minded podcast. We don't like the neoliberal themes of forgiving, bad guys, like just kind of off, out of nowhere. That happens a lot. You'll find in a lot of recent media. I won't name names, so I'm not like making any enemies here, but there's a lot of like, media where like the bad guy has done something horrible, like started a war, and then they're kind of forgiven just because they feel bad or because, they have a sad backstory or something like that. And I think one of my favorite things about my players anyway, and let me know if I'm going off on too much of a tangent.
By all means, go for it.
One of my favorite things about my players is that they can be both empathetic, but they can also understand that someone doesn't need to be forgiven. So in the first arc, at the very end, they find out that the weapons dealer is doing what he's doing because he has been put into a difficult predicament because he's in a foreign country now and he's trying to make a better life for his daughters, but he keeps dealing weapons to the ruling party, which has been, provably corrupt. So they can like understand where he's coming from on one hand, but on the other hand, he's also done a lot of harm, so they don't forgive him. And that same thing happens in Arc 2, where they find out that like, this ringleader has like an upsetting backstory, but he's still hurt someone in the party a great deal. So, he doesn't want that person in the party doesn't want to forgive him. That kind of thing is I really like the message of not having to necessarily forgive someone, but that redemption is an action that is carried out by someone and not, something that can just be given by any one person.
So, like, I understand your reasoning, but I still do not forgive you, and that's the step that I need to take to move on, type of deal.
It kind of like that, yeah. It's like, because if one person forgives this bad guy, and that's always kind of what I'm afraid of, and that's why I'm really blessed to have the party I have that is so, critical, is like, if one person forgives the person, it's just like, oh, I understand where you're coming from. I feel so bad for you. But they're not the person that was hurt by the person they're forgiving. Then it's not really forgiveness. It's not really redemption, because it's like, what really matters is this person who has done something demonstrably bad needs to deserve forgiveness from the people that they have hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So the people they have repressed, and it needs to be a constant effort towards being someone who is worthy of the forgiveness for the people they've hurt, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, and those type of topics are always hard. And what's actually funny is when I first started back up on my podcast back in July, I had originally, before entering the Twitter space, I had no intention of talking about anything that could possibly be controversial. And I'm just like, no, let's not talk about sexism, even though I've experienced it. I don't want to talk about racism because I don't understand it as well, because I don't have to deal with it. I don't want to talk about the boomers versus millennials and like all of the problems and elitisms and all those things. I didn't want to talk about those things. I just wanted to talk about D&D. And then the more that I entered the Twitter space, while yes, I still get to talk about D&D and I still get to talk about the things that I love, it's important to bring those things up because those exist. They exist. They're there. It can't just be ignored. I might not necessarily be the right person to talk about all of it, which is why you promote other people who are talking about it. Like when they had the Black AF Roundtable, or when you have your friends that are doing so well, like Three Black Halflings or Transplaners or full LGBT groups like you guys and the Chosen Ones or Birdhouse Mysteries, like all these amazing groups that are underrepresented, that could be more represented with the platform that I have, even if I don't fit the necessary same set of parameters, I guess. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And I definitely agree with that, but that's incredibly important. Like, always, every time that you get an opportunity to, you should be elevating these voices and looking for more voices to promote, and, just doing everything you can to encourage and develop, anyone who really needs it, who's in that space.
I try to help a lot of people in the community, and I think I've done a good job with it. The only people I have either not wanted to assist or like kind of shied away from are the ones that were either super duper angry and it was directed towards me, which has not happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very thankful for that. Or if they were, other than like close friends, but if they were so depressing that it was triggering my depression,
Mm-hmm.
I've had to step away from those types of people. But otherwise, I'm like, I'm here. I'll tweet out your stuff. I'll give you a like. I'll try my best to give you a listen. I don't have time. I have 1,000 other podcasts. But it's interesting to see how much people are going through, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do like what you said, like, about how, you came slowly to realize these things are important to talk about. I was a little afraid. I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to come on here and then just going to come out guns blazing, and Nikki's going to be like, oh my gosh, we are 5 minutes in and already talking about anti-racism. This is a lot, but
No, we've had a couple of episodes now where we talked about inclusion, or we talked about racism, or we talked about anti-colonialism, LGBT, women and all that stuff. So there's been quite a few over the last couple of months. And then there's been a couple that are just fun and loose. And I like to combine them both. Like, I don't think an episode has to be completely serious. It could also be fun, which is just to show that we are here for the hobby.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, obviously, my show's been described as funny. I think it's still accidentally on Spotify under comedy. Oh, no. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely under comedy for some reason. But I mean, like, even though we have these messages of like forgiveness and redemption and when forgiveness isn't deserved, and obviously we have problems with the police. That comes up a lot. So, we're not really hiding that. But also, I mean, we do still have like the human connection, because that's really important to me to portray in Tapestry. And that's kind of like, it's what I like to carry into all of my games, because I think it's what's most fun about a TTRG. And I know it's not, I know not everyone is there for, human connection and whatever. People are sometimes just there for combat or, things like that.
I love human connection so much. That's one of the reasons why, like, when I started my Monday game, the new one that I'm in, I had the first moment actually this week that was like, this is what I've been wanting to DM. Because my prior game, while I liked the story, it was very goofy, it was very chaotic, it was very overpowered, which was my fault at first. And it was funny. I enjoyed it to a point, but I wanted a group of people that roleplayed, that connected, that would work together as a team, that would show emotion when things happened. And it wasn't just like, oh, your character died? Okay, let's bring out a new character. And that happened on Monday this week when 2 of our players had left due to scheduling reasons. And I killed them off very brutally when the party was asleep.
Oh, geez.
And they woke up to their Dragonborn Warforged character, because we allowed an elf and an orc had a little baby book so we could have mixed races.
Mm-hmm.
His throat was slit, and then the Warforged, who was on watch, was completely torn apart.
Oh.
And then they went on a hunt and found the people who did it and utterly destroyed them.
Mm-hmm.
And then had a beautiful burial where they dug the grave themselves, and they had Ellen's character, Sozie, made a floral wreath to put on each of the graves to mark it. And it was like a moment of silence and a moment of like, this is what I like in a story, where it's like the teary moments, whether you actually cry or not, but like you see it in Critical Role where people get so connected to their characters that you feel it. You feel that connection, and I missed it.
Yeah, as a DM, I love those moments. It is always a little terrifying because you really have to have a group of people you trust there when you have those moments. But when you do, like, there is just the tension in the air is just palpable, and everyone is quiet and hanging on every word that you and the other person are saying, and it's really amazing to be a part of, honestly.
Yeah, I've experienced it as a player. I think this is maybe the first time I've done it as a DM. Like, I've killed off characters before when they left, but it was always in like a funny. My biggest thing is if a player is gonna leave, I'm gonna kill their character off. It's the easiest and laziest way for me to get rid of them, because I don't want to think about, oh well, they decide that they want to rush off, and then you convince them with a 20 persuasion that they should stay, and then I have to run an NPC, and I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really interesting. And then it reminded me of like the games that I've played where we lost characters, and our characters, like, we lost a player the first time. Like, I wasn't even friends with this character yet. They were a brand new character. I felt bad because the player who played it just lost his other character, so this was a brand new character.
Mm-hmm.
In our first fight, he gets one shot, I think.
Oh, no.
And my character's like, I just made that friend, and like went on a rampage. But it was funny to get like that connection. And I love the games where you feel that the fear when you need to feel it, but also the happiness when you need to feel it.
Oh, for sure. I don't think I've actually killed many people. I do intend to kill people in Tapestry, spoiler alert. I've only warned Atticus though, so I feel like I'll get in trouble whenever it happens to the others. But I've only killed people in home games. I've probably enough times to count on one hand, probably far less than that. But I remember when I did, and oh boy, that after that session, I feel like I got in a lot of trouble. I say trouble. I say it lightly. Like people were very upset after that. Like driving home from the game, they were like talking about it to decompress. And I realize now, knowing what I do, having been in the community for a while, it's like we should have had a talk afterwards where like we met, one on one and were able to like decompress properly.
Mhm.
I realize that now, but oof, like you don't realize how much like an NPC that I don't think he only had like 10 lines or something. But the circumstances of his death were I suppose very dramatic, and I didn't realize how many people were attached and how many people would be upset afterwards, because I think it was the first game I'd ever run where the players didn't win, and maybe they were just so used to winning that it just took them by surprise. But yeah, like I don't know. Like it's very powerful. I'm always a little scared to run a game where I kill someone because people get very attached to my NPCs. And that's the thing I always hear is like, "Oh, I'm very attached to the NPCs. They can only have like a line or two lines and I'm very attached." And that's something I pride myself on because I try really hard to build NPCs that are, they're significant. They care. And I think the biggest thing about building an NPC that like really resonates with someone is A, to keep them consistent, but B, to have them care about the PCs in some tangible way, to have them interact and, be a part of the PC's life in some way.
Mhm.
Like this particular character was a student at a ballet studio that was run by one of the PCs, and he happened to also be a rebel, and then he was killed for that. So it was very sad, but I don't know. I think that kind of emotion in TTRPGs is I really like it. I know a lot of DMs joke about like, "Oh, I like the angst. I like to make them cry. I like to make them feel." And I do. I really do like that, but I'm always scared of it, I'll be honest.
I think everybody is a little scared of it.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, even like there are some DMs out there that are like, live for that. They're like, yes, be afraid, be very afraid. That is the goal.
Mhm.
But I think you want to make sure that it conveyed properly, and you want to make sure that it was taken appropriately, and that everybody is enjoying it. And when you see that moment, you like feel a little guilty, but also you're like, this is the reaction I wanted.
Yes.
Or oh shit, I meant that to not be that bad. But oh, you really like that guy.
Yes, I definitely understand that, like, cause yeah, like even though like that night they were just like, "Oh man, we could have done this to save him. We could have done this. Like, dang it, Dan, why did you not let us save him?" That kind of thing. After a few days, in fact, like months later, they look back on it and they're like, "That was so dramatic. Wow." And I'm like, "You guys were so upset that night. Like, don't think I forgot." But I realize now, like, I guess I wasn't a player, so maybe the upset was part of the fun for them. Maybe the drama was part of the fun. I've never really been a player in this situation. Just a DM who's shaking and they're terrified of hurting people.
As a player, I think I've told this story. I'm pretty sure I told this story on the podcast before, but we were in my Friday game, and we became connected to the sweet cake lady. Is the only way. That's what we knew her as. And every morning we made it a hobby, or a habit, I'm sorry, where they go out. They're like, "I'm gonna get sweet cakes," and one of us would go outside, spend some gold, and get some sweet cakes. Well, sweet cakes are like a couple copper, and we were just handing her like 10, 20 gold or something like that, and buying her out for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened for like literal months. So one day we go out and the sweet cake lady's not there. And we're like, "Where's sweet cake lady?" And at this point, we still don't know her name, but we're just like, "Where's the sweet cake lady?" So we go and find her, and we find out that she had we find another sweet cake person, and we're like, we're looking for the sweet cake lady. And they're like, oh, well, I sell sweet cake. I'm like, no, not you.
Mhm.
Though I'm sure you're lovely. Another elderly lady who works in front of the inn. And they're like, oh, you mean Mildred? And we're like, oh, Mildred, that was her name. Where's Mildred? She's been missing. And we found out that, like, we found where she lived, and we rushed over. We're like, Mildred, what's happening? And Mildred's crying. We're like, who hurt you? What happened? We will fix it. And we couldn't fix it completely because what had happened was we gave her so much money that she was able to buy a house, which is great. And she's going to have a bakery and a house, and she's going to have a safe place to live for her, her daughter, and her grandson. Except somebody found out that she had a lot of money and said, give me all your gold, after she had already put the deposit down, and they threatened her grandson's life. She didn't have the money anymore. And her grandson supposedly slipped and fell into the well.
Oh, geez.
And did not survive. So we found out who did this, destroyed them brutally. And Mildred kind of adopted us as like her, like, not kids, but just like adopted us. So she's now part of our character stories, and we still every once in a while go, I just want to go visit Mildred, see how she's doing. And we have like 3 little orphans that live with us, and we're like, go hang out with Mildred, and she treats them like her grandkids. And it's just like, we're like, how dare you hurt Mildred / the sweet cake lady that we didn't know her name.
Oh man, I don't know, that's a really good point. That, like, kind of if an NPC like keeps coming in and and like giving you something like the sweet cake lady, like I could definitely see forming an attachment to the sweet cake lady for sure. So I just never thought about it that way. Like, because honestly, you get that way with in your normal life. Like if you see, I don't know, someone, if you're at the store, or you're constantly getting helped by the same person. That happened to me at my local Safeway, this is a sad story, just as a heads up. But there was this like really lovely lady who would always ring us up. And I think her name was Robin, and she would always ring us up, and she was just like, oh, did you two want me to get you some spoons for your gelato? Like, we'd buy gelato, and she'd like give us plastic spoons so we didn't have to wait to go home to eat it. She was really cool. But like then like one day, obviously she wasn't there, and we were like, oh, what happened? But we didn't ask anyone. Just one day we were carrying our bags out, and we happened to pass a framed picture, and it turns out she had passed. So it was really sad. And that kind of reminds me of that. It's just like, these are things that happen in real life. Like, we obviously have interactions with people like that in real life.
You're just like, I really like that person. That one acquaintance that I really don't know, but I like the familiarity of them being there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think NPCs like should kind of be that way, where they're just actual people. Like, these are actual people you're talking to. They're living actual lives, and that's what makes them so easy to connect to, is, the fact that they are interacting with you like someone normally would in real life. Like, obviously it's a fantasy world. Obviously this is a story that is made up. This is a fictional character, but I feel like it like really increases your player's attachment to the world and the story if they have a handful of people that they care about. Like, I just introduced a mechanic because I got my start. I think my first love of RPGs probably, my first love came from Vampire the Masquerade Redemption back in the 90s. But like it found a really big resurgence in Dragon Age, and I really like the mechanic of friendship and rivalry, so I incorporated that kind of into Tapestry. That's not a mechanic that we're using yet, but I warned them that it is in the pipeline after playing things like Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which has like strings and things like that. So I told them, I warned them, I was like, okay, so just so you know, like, good interaction will be rewarded with a friendship point, bad interactions will be given a rivalry point. And because of this, there's like different levels where like you get advantage or disadvantage on charisma checks and things like that. And I think it's just anything you can do to make it so that it's obvious that whatever you say to this person is tangible, because they are, for all intents and purposes, real. I feel like that's just really important, because then you're not going to end up with the murder hobos. Then you're going to end up with somebody who is left with the repercussions of having said something bad to someone and then having to pay the consequence of it in game.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters that I've made that still live rent-free in my head, and there's some that I've completely forgotten. 100% just I'm like, who? I don't remember that character at all. But like some of my favorites that I will always remember is Pixel, my gnome decker from my Shadowrun game that my friend ran that I've spoken multiple times about, who, and honestly, when I get connected to a character, like I feel their emotions. Like I start to go, why are you upset with me? And even though it's like, I know it's not them, but I'm like, I'm actually upset now. Roya, my Vidalcan druid from Dragon Heist, is one of my favorite characters. Rissa, who I'm playing currently for Behold Clearlight, she's a lot of fun to play. One that I got really connected to, but this was a Discord game and it was purely text based. But Kiko was an Aven Ranger cleric rogue, and I just fell in love with her story and the way that she grew, because she was a ranger and then she was killed on a mission to rescue her friend, because you could go on resurrection missions, and her friend was a ghost in the process, and she was killed in the process, and her ghost friend made a deal with a cleric group to resurrect both of them in exchange for their servitude for 6 months. So she was forced to take a level in cleric to get resurrected. And then as she was a cleric, she learned how to sneak out of the church because she didn't want to be there, thus taking levels in rogue. And then she just kept taking levels in rogue after that. And in that system, they're like, oh, you could just get rid of that cleric. You never respect your character. You get a free respec. And I'm like, why would I do that? Well, because cleric's not I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, I didn't need cleric. I'm not going to use anything from one level of cleric, really, because I don't need it. But it's part of her story now. It is forever there.
Yeah, that always kind of bums me out when people are like, "Oh, but such and such isn't optimized." And it's just like, I didn't make this person to be optimized. I made them because they're a character, and if I want them to have like 3 levels of barbarian, 3 levels of wizard, and I have to split up their skills in order to make it work, well then that's on me. I think it's fun to play it that way. And it's like definitely not optimized, definitely gonna be in trouble in a fight, but I think it's fun that way.
Speaking of not optimized characters, since I told you I was going to bring it up,
Oh boy.
my new blood cleric.
Mhm.
I'm so excited. So Cheryl gave me the idea, but I was looking for a background, and she's like, what about amnesia? And I'm like, I have not done that one because that's not one in the book. So I was thinking on it a little bit, and since this is for a home game, I'm like, okay, I could see what's available. And then my friend mentioned the blood cleric domain, because I'm not a huge fan of playing clerics usually. But she's like, well, try this one. It's not the same as a normal cleric. Maybe you'll enjoy it. I was like, fine, I'll try it. So we're playing Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Mhm.
And the biggest thing about that one is Ariel, Auriel, I might be pronouncing her name wrong, is this goddess. And she is basically the one that, if I'm understanding correctly, is causing all the winter. That's who they believe is causing the never-ending winter.
Mhm.
And my random role was, and I can say this because I don't think any of the players are going to listen to this. Well, Greg is going to listen to it. Greg, don't metagame this. My role is that she was supposedly blessed by Ariel because she was born on a particular day. And all that really gives her is cold resistance. Nothing really special. But I said, because of her amnesia, what if her god is Ariel and she doesn't remember? She doesn't realize that she's worshiping the quote bad guy
Mhm.
the entire time. And she doesn't realize that she has blood magic.
Oh.
She just thinks she's just a cleric until at one point something desperate happens. Like she casts inflict wounds and it does a little bit more damage. Or she goes to do something and it pulls the blood from them for some reason and she freaks out.
Oh, wow.
That's what I want to do with it. And then with the background that I found, I really like this concept. You don't know what your skills in extra languages are yet. you don't figure them out until you roll a stat and get 18 plus or higher, or 18 or higher. So the first 2 skills that I roll an 18 or higher on, I get those skills with proficiency. And that's how my background chooses it. And the first 2 languages I run into, I'm going to roll an intelligence check. And the first I get 18 or higher on, I learn those 2 languages. Because I suddenly realized that, hey, I actually understand what you're saying. Why do I understand what you're saying? And I just talked to Ashley about, I looked in the book, but only like, I just basically did a control F for dwarves. Like I was trying purposely not to metagame and cheat and like read anything. But I looked for all the dwarf characters in there, and I won't say which one I picked, but I'm like, what if I'm related to this person? But I don't know my last name, but they know who I am. And that's when I find out who I actually am. And she's like, I like it. Let's do it. I'm like, yes. So excited.
Nice. Yeah, I really like that. I think that's a big part of, I guess this just is kind of a segue, but in the it's a big part of session zeros. Like I really like where players will put together what they want out of the game. And they're just like, well, this would be really cool for me. This would be really fun. I really want this to happen, because then it helps a DM kind of tailor a story around what a player wants it to be. And that's really cool. That should always be the end goal, I think, is like your DM should always be striving to build a story around you rather than build a story and kind of slot you in, where it's convenient for them.
Yeah, and it's been hard, I can say, because this is my 4th character in this campaign.
Oh, wow.
And we're only level 4.
Oh, my goodness.
They keep dying. I'm the only one who keeps dying.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's wild.
It's bad. I'm just so the first character died twice. She died and then was magically resurrected, but by like not us, because we were like level 1, but by the particular quest. And then she died again like the next day. And then my second character decided to leave because the character I made did not meld with the party at all. And I wasn't having fun in the game. And I'm like, I need to make a change, Ashley. Like, I can't keep doing this. Like, she is too serious. And there is absolutely no reason for her to stay with the party. She would be safer if she was further away. And we decided that she actually, like, she left. And then eventually they found a satyr frozen in the ice, and it was her. And then my ranger swarmkeeper died yesterday.
Oh gosh.
Yesterday of when we recorded it. But I was just like, no, Ashley, why are you picking on me? And she's like, I'm not, I swear, the dice. She does the same thing I do. She rolls the dice to determine who it hits. If it could be something big. So if it's not like, oh, well, you did more damage to me type of thing, I'll just roll oh, there's 3 of you. I roll a d6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, they're attacking this person. So that's what she did. And I got coup de grace by one of my teammates because he got mind controlled for a round.
Oh, geez.
And had to hit a random target, and I was the random target on the die.
Yeah, I definitely do the thing where the person who's done the most damage or the person who attacked last gets attacked next, just because I feel like, I don't know, that makes sense from an enemy standpoint. But I introduced this mechanic called a roll of high consequence, where I'm going to just kill a player like, because it feels not narratively satisfying. I guess I'm in a different situation as someone who's got like a big narrative focused story going on, but which is obviously like specific to these 3 characters and not a module or something like that. So I want to make sure if something does happen to them. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that the statistics, I guess, are in their favor a little bit. The roll of high consequence, I've only had 1 so far. There are more coming up, but they're kind of closer to a Powered by the Apocalypse situation where I have a certain number range based on what skill I think they'll roll. And it's just like, this certain range, you get obviously a failure. In the next range, you get a mixed success. And then the next range, you get a success, obviously. And these can determine, if an NPC dies, an NPC they're close to, or it can determine they die, or if something, just if you completely fail something that's very important to you. So I don't know. Like, I just want to make sure that I'm being, I guess, even-handed. Like, because I know my players get very attached to their characters, and I'm sure everyone does. But I mean, I don't want to hurt them. I'm doing that thing again where it's just like I'm a DM who really doesn't want to hurt the player unless it comes right down to it and it's narratively satisfying, and the player has been like, you know what, fine, it's okay. If the player has given me a thumbs up and everything, like my player gave me a thumbs up for the grievous injury that happens in Arc 2. So that's good. But yeah, I suppose I'm very soft. I'm a very soft DM that's just like, is this okay? Like, I don't want to.
Can I hurt you, please?
Yes, I always ask first, and then if they're like, oh yeah, hurt me, I'm like, okay, you asked for it. You handed me the knife.
You ran into my knife.
Yeah.
So what's funny is, like, I don't think I've killed maybe one or two, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I've killed people because they left the game or they wanted to change characters. I don't think I've never purposely killed somebody. I might have targeted them because they were pissing me off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if it was a death, it was like, oh fuck, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Oh yeah,
that died. So it was like one of those. But like the death scene from Monday with the two brutal murders, that was because they left the game purely. If they wouldn't have left the game, that wouldn't have happened. That scene would have never existed.
Yeah,
because I don't want them to die, but I do like to throw deadly things at them to see how far I can push it, which is what I used to do. I'm learning in this campaign I need to break that habit because the other campaign was very overpowered, so I literally could throw triple deadly encounters at them and they would survive. And this one, they don't have all the magic gear and everything, and I'm like, here's a jackal ware. Oh wait, you can't actually hurt them. Shit.
Yeah.
1 second, let me just nerf that. It's resistance now instead of I literally was like, hold on, I need to talk to a better DM than me, and I messaged my friend.
Yeah.
Or no, I think I said I need to speak to a different DM, and I messaged my friend, and I just pasted the quote of can only be hurt by piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning damage with a silvered weapon or magical weapon. And he's just like, oh fuck. And I'm like, I fucked up. What do I do? And he's like, resistance? I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Because they don't have silver weapons because they weren't expecting were creatures. There wasn't a reason to. I just threw them at them.
Yeah. I try to make sure things are balanced, but it's kind of like you were saying, I'm the overpowered parties. Like my home games, I give them so many magical items and random things that it's being completely imbalanced by the end of it. So they can just destroy basically anything. But in Tapestry, I'm learning better how to balance, and I'm learning more about statistics, and I'm learning more about, how to make sure that I'm not going to wipe them out, but I'm still going to make it, terrifyingly close. Like I hate to mention Dimension 20 again. Actually, I don't. I love Dimension 20, but Dimension 20 is really, really good at doing that because Brennan will throw them into a bunch of fights, one every other episode, and they're so well balanced that players will go down, but they'll get back up, and it's very close. It's very tense. And I learned a lot just from watching those, just like, oh, so it's actually, it's good to be close and to not completely stomp something. So I've had to learn how to get how to get them really close. There's one part in Arc 2 where I was honestly scared to death. They decided to take on something that was a CR that I was already worried about throwing at them, but I was like, they should be okay. But then they engaged the BBAG of the arc early.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did they get completely wiped by the BBAG earlier than they were supposed to, they also went back in time so that the BBAG has all of his spell slots and health back. And they have to deal with the BBAG plus like the monster I paired with the BBAG. So I was just like, oh my God, is this going to work? Is this going to be okay? But they kept insisting. They were just like, no, we can do this. Let's just do it. Because Elijah wanted to drink with his friends later. And if they waited any longer, he wouldn't make it. So that was the whole reason, is he wanted to meet with his friends later. So they had to do it right then and there.
Interesting reasons.
I'll give him this. It's because you probably know the conceit of the show already, is that like it's a time loop. So he has already lived that experience of having drinks with his friends. And during that time, one of his friends has an important conversation with him. So he really wanted to be there for his friend for that important conversation. So it makes sense. But still, I was so scared they were going to die just for this important conversation. I even kept telling him, I was like, you can call him or something. You can just let him know. But no, he was insistent. And they lived. Spoilers. So,
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert for everyone who doesn't realize it's still going. They lived through Arc 2.
Do we want to mention anything about the sci-fi game? Because that's a thing.
We could definitely do that. It is for sure a thing. It is on my mind and I'm terrified.
So one thing that I am super excited for, and I know that you're excited, but also we're both anxious for, is a future science fiction Savage Worlds game podcast.
Yes.
There's a lot of words in that sentence. That Dan and I will be running.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or Dan will be DMing, and then we'll both be editing, and we have a couple of players, and we are working out the kinks right now and getting characters prepared in session 0 soon, and hopefully in like 2-ish months. So it's a little early, but in like 2-ish months, you will. In about a month, I'm gonna start dropping shit. I'm gonna be like, "Hey, look at this thing. Look how cool this thing is." But in 2-ish months, I look forward to playing some space sci-fi or space Savage Worlds.
Oh, yeah. For sure. I'm excited, nervous, but I'm really excited. I'm also excited because could you refresh me on why it was you decided you wanted to put this together and like your
how the turns
your philosophy behind it. Now I'm the interviewer, Nikki. Haha.
So I originally came up with the idea that I knew I wanted to play a science fiction game. I've been really, really wanting to play one. And I wanted to play something that wasn't D&D. And then but the biggest thing I wanted to play with a group of diverse people, because I haven't had that experience before. Because the people I play with currently is my best friend and her husband, and me and my husband, and we're all white. And while we have a couple of friends that are BIPOC and multiple in the LGBT plus community, and we play with some of them, it was usually just the 4 of us, which is perfectly fine for our home games. But I wanted to expand. I wanted to experience that, and I wanted to make sure that I was offering that to other people as well to experience it too. And when I posted the interest out on the interwebs, I don't think I put much thought beyond that. And I was just like, I know what I want. I want a sci-fi game. I want it to be a podcast. I want it to be diverse. And I don't want it to be D&D. Who's interested? And there was about 16 people, 17 people who were interested. And there were a couple that I'm like, oh, I don't want to say no. But I was really excited with the people that we ended up choosing. And then it took a couple of months because of life and COVID, and we lost 2 players, and then we found 2 new players, which I think will make it even better, honestly. Though I will miss the players that were supposed to be in the game, and I completely legitimately understand. But I just wanted to see what happened and what I could learn from playing at that type of table more than just on a one shot.
Yeah, I really agree that like tables should be more diverse. That makes more interesting stories. So like I was actually talking with one of my players, and she was telling me that she wants to explore, more Filipino culture because that's her culture, and she wants to see more of that in a fantasy setting. And of course, there have been so many amazing TTRPG Kickstarters right now. One of them just ended. I think it's Our Shores. And then there's also the Islands one that was kickstarted, I think, last year. But Yeah, so I thought that was really amazing because this is an opportunity for, I mean, it's not all the, I kind of like having my players contribute to my world in general, but also, I'm I'm white, so I don't have much. I don't have much here, but like I just really liked the experience of getting to talk to this player and having this player say, "I kind of want you to research and build based on this." And I really like to be able to tell that story for her because it's like it's clearly important because she said, I don't get to see this in fantasy. And earlier you were saying you don't get to see 1920s in fantasy. And whenever I was a little baby who was interested in, you know, LGBT plus 1920s fantasy, I didn't get that either. So it's just as we are, putting more and more, like TTRPG stories out there, I like that they're becoming more and more diverse because I feel like that just makes them more rich and interesting. So I do like that that was part of your mission statement for this one.
Yeah, and I wanted to keep it its own thing because I also didn't want to be like, oh, well, this is to get clout for Beholder to No One. I'm like, no, this is its own thing. Sure, like might be the one that's like at the forefront of it, and we might mention Beholder to No One, which is cool and whatever, but we're also going to mention everybody else's stuff. But that was never the reason, because it's going to be a baby. It's going to be like, hey, one viewer, listener, go listen to my other stuff. But I was really excited for it, and I've been actively trying, like with the one shots it's a little bit more difficult because of schedule constraints, but with our next actual play after Behold Clearlight, I've already started planning that, and I'm super excited for some of the guests that are in line for that.
Nice.
And I'm excited for some of the people that are going to be in our future Vampire the Masquerade game. That will be unrelated. It's still going to be a Beholder to No One thing, but unrelated to anything else we're doing. So I'll have 4 shows, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, Nikki.
I don't know when to stop. But I'm very excited for that too, and that's also in the works. So it's been a fun experience, and it's been fun and interesting and eye-opening to learn from others, because I did grow up in a sheltered environment and I didn't see these types of things, and now I do. And I don't know what else I could do but just help. So that's what I'm gonna do. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna stop playing with the friends that I do have just so I can play with others. But that just means that I can add more people to my table.
Yeah, I think adding people to the table to get, more experience, more lived experience is really important.
1000%. So, I have a question. What, if you can say, is your favorite moment of tabletop games? Like just a moment that's like forever stuck in your brain that you hold near and dear to your heart. And it could be a moment where you were a player or a DM.
Goodness. I'm basically a forever DM. I almost never play, but there was this one moment that Bianca actually reminded me of the other night where I had it so the rest of the party had to go through this. It was actually the first time well, not the first time, but one of the few times I've done an actual dungeon. The rest of the party were going through what was essentially a water temple, and this PC that belonged to Bianca was a vampire, so she couldn't go into, running water. So she had to stay up with an NPC. And throughout this arc, it had been kind of mentioned that this NPC had an unrequited crush on her PC. And he got a lot of flack for that. But they got this moment alone because he offered to stay behind with her, while she had to wait for everyone to go finish the water circumstances. I don't remember what they were. But they got to have this like talk, this actually genuine downtime talk where they talked about just kind of what was important to them. And, like he talked about like, because she was like a sailor and he came from, his family was sailors. So they just had a talk that was just kind of genuine, and it was in the middle of a dungeon. It was in the middle of a very intense part of it. Like, so it wasn't necessarily downtime. It wasn't sit down next to a bonfire, you know, you've got to go out the next day kind of business. It was, we were in the middle of something, but all of like the puzzles and the intensity, and you know, I think they were hunting a god or something. And
As you do.
yeah, as you do, often in my games. But they like all this intense stuff was happening, and then we just get this break of these two sitting on the edge of like a pool of water that goes down into, you know, a series of labyrinths into other rooms. And they're just having this incredibly genuine talk about, you know, like he obviously respected her boundaries. Like he knew that she wasn't interested, but they just had a really nice talk, and it was nice. It was just a very compelling character moment that really stood out to me. So I think that might be my favorite.
That's awesome. I love those kind of conversations, or just like those moments where you get that connection with an NPC or a PC even.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that was special.
I do like that, yes.
I think mine, so I might be misremembering, and I'm sure my friend Bill will correct me, but because he was the DM from this game. So I've mentioned before that Pixel, and I've mentioned her multiple times in this podcast. She was dating someone who was the daughter of the Irish mafia.
Oh, wow.
And we got in a lot of trouble. And me being me, being stupidly in love with this character, tried to convince her to run away with me. Run away with me to Hong Kong, I believe it was. Fuck your family. Just come with me. And the only way that this would have succeeded is if I rolled a natural 20. Now, Shadowrun doesn't usually use natural or a d20, but the way we were playing was using d20s. I rolled a natural 20.
Oh, wow.
I convinced her to go, and she's like, "Of course. Where do I need to be? What do I need to do?" I'm like, okay, meet me at the docks, and we're leaving on this day at this time. And the next day, I think it was, I got word, or I got a letter, I think it was. And basically it was like, here is 20,000 nuyen, I think is what they used. Here's 20,000 nuyen for you to go and and never see my daughter again. And I found out somehow that if we both went, we would both be killed. So if we went to that dock and I was with her, she would be killed. I didn't care that I would be killed. I cared that she would be killed. So I had to convince her that the day had changed. I had to lie to her and tell her that the day had changed, and I convinced her. And then I could never talk to her again. And I took the money because I desperately needed it, but I forever was like, she's gonna, like, I knew what her mom would say. Her mom would tell her she took the money she took the money over you. And after the game ended, I asked the DM, like, the story wasn't over, but we had stopped playing shortly thereafter and never really got back. And I'm like, hey, I'm just curious, what happened? And he just gave me a look that I knew that she was killed anyway.
Jeez.
And in my character doesn't know that. So my character left feeling like she did the right thing, even though she felt, or she knew that she just betrayed the person that she loved. But she did it to save their lives, and it was for their survival. But it was a very interesting trip because she was also recovering from a surgery and in a crate, and it was very, very weird 3 days. But that was like one of my favorite moments because I genuinely was sad. I'm just like, why do you do this? He's like, what did you think was gonna happen? I'm like, I don't know. You let me live happily ever after with my girlfriend. Jesus. But yeah, that was probably one of my favorite moments.
This is where me being soft comes in. It's just like, I don't like to I don't like to kill an NPC or a character that I know people are attached to, you know, especially not off screen. I guess that's just me being a bit of a marshmallow.
Well, I wasn't upset about it or anything, so I will emphasize that. And in Shadowrun, it's a darker world. Like, basically, it's kill or be killed in some situations, and keep your mouth shut or be killed, or do the thing or be killed. Like, that's the world and an environment that you're living in.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into it knowing, like, oh, this isn't just fantasy. This is like post-apocalyptic survival type shit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another story that I won't go too far into, but it was like, we found out it was the wrong person, and I'm like, this is the wrong person. She's innocent. She didn't do anything. And they're like, you have your orders, and my orders were to shoot her.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to decide to shoot her or disobey.
Mm-hmm.
And if I disobeyed, I would die or be permanently kicked from everything that I used to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like those types of desperate situations that you find yourself in that type of game. But I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I think my best friend would be the same exact way. She's like, no, I don't want to hurt you. Maybe this will happen. And she's done that so many times. He's like, he suddenly feels bad and you survive.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely wouldn't bend the rules of reality. Like, I wouldn't break the rules of reality. I might bend them, but I wouldn't like destroy a narrative just to make sure that someone didn't get hurt. But I would, you know, I would do everything I could to make sure that like, I don't know, that my character's okay. But then again, I did just say I have an NPC that I know that they're close to that I am planning to kill. So I'm a double-edged sword that way, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if it adds something to the story, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, definitely.
If it's important to the narrative and it makes
Mm-hmm.
complete sense. Like, I don't like to just, and I never take offense if a character is killed, just if it's important for the narrative, even if it's my character. I'm like, no, that's legit. She pissed off the wrong person. No, I would have done the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still sad. I mean, think of all your favorite novels. There's characters in there that you're like, no, you're not allowed to die. You're my favorite. Why are you having this sad moment where you're reaching out and talking to him for the last time? No.
Yeah.
You just want to go find the author and go, bad. How dare you?
Definitely.
But also, like, you're like page turning.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can never kill a PC or an NPC, but I am saying that I just like, for me personally, it takes a lot for me to be like, yep, all right, I'll hit the kill switch then.
Yeah, I get it. 100%. So, that's actually the end of the episode. So, it's already been an hour.
Oh, nice.
So, why don't you just tell the lovely people out there where they can find you?
Okie dokie. Again, my name is Dan. You can find me on Twitter at Lani, Lani, Dan D, which is Dee. But I prefer it if you found me on Twitter at The Last Tapestry, and you can also find our website at www.thelasttapestry.com. I really hope I said that right. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the places that I'm at on the internet.
Fantastic. And Dan is also part of the Pod Squad.
Yes, I am.
So, excite. I'll be
Yay.
excited. Well, thank you again for joining. It was a lot of fun. Then I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
And for everybody else, you know where to find me. Beholder to No One at Twitter. Eventually, beholdertoknoone.com. You can find me wherever podcasts can be found. And if you're just listening to our discussions, hey, we have 2 other shows out there. So feel free to check those out too. We have on Thursdays, we switch between Beholder to One Shot, where we play random, usually non-D&D tabletop games. Or we have our current Behold Clearlight, our actual play that is horror-esque and getting kind of dark. And the last episode that we recorded that's coming up in a month. Oh boy. Oh boy, that's all I'm going to say. All right, have fun. I'll leave you on that one. Bye.